Hey, everybody, it's Wynter with the Shift Spotlight, and today we are here with Colin Sanburg. He is the founder and visionary of finelevate.com, which we are going to get into what FinElevate is. But before we do, let's start off with a little bit of fun. Why don't you share with us an interesting fact about you that maybe people don't really know about you?
Yeah, so I'll tell you, I have an executive MBA. I went back to business school, even as an entrepreneur, which is a little bit unusual, but far more unusual is that I actually don't have a bachelor's degree, even though I have an MBA. So yeah, it's kind of a long story, but coming out of high school, I wasn't really on the go away to college track at that point in my life. And once I kind of got my life together and met someone who had actually gone through a similar path. He had an associate's degree and was able to convince a school, and it inspired me. And I basically hounded this executive MBA program until they agreed to let me in, as long as I could take the GMAT and do well enough. And so here I am. I have a master's degree. I have no bachelor's degree.
That is a very interesting fact. That's really cool. I love that. Yeah. Okay, so why don't you tell us at a high level what it is that you do?
Well, are you talking about my newest venture or just me in general?
Yeah, let's talk about your newest venture, or if you want to talk about you in general, we can do that too.
Well, I can touch on the me in general. So I'm a multi-business owner. I've been in entrepreneurship for over 20 years, starting with my very first business, which is a whole other story. But once I got to the point where I had multiple businesses, I kept as more of a financial entrepreneur, which I think is kind of a bit of an oddity, a bit of a rare case, that I always had that financial focus. Most entrepreneurs are much more focused around sales, or they're passionate about their product. And I just always gravitated, for whatever reason, to the financial side. And so when I had multiple businesses, I was always trying to handle the financial part of those businesses, kind of think of it like a home office, or just kind of a holding company kind of approach. Right. And I couldn't add any value. And so what I realized was that's just a very common thing, that even me being a financially oriented business owner wasn't going to add value of just doing the basics of bookkeeping. Right. And so when I finally figured out that formula, I started FinElevate, which is my newest venture. I'm really excited about, because I love being around other entrepreneur groups, whether it's masterminds or just one-on-one with entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. And so this gave me a path to help entrepreneurs in a way that I'd always help my friend network, but also be in this area that I'm passionate about, which is business finance. So we do the day-to-day bookkeeping for companies, but we don't stop there. In fact, that's the boring part that we don't like to talk about a lot. Right. We also jump into actually helping them with the financial side of their business. So, helping, whether their goal is to grow or to make more money or improve cash flow or exit their business, we start with their goal, and then we basically build a custom playbook to help them actually achieve that goal.
So, like, for example, if you were running somebody's books and, helping them, and then they said right now, hey, look, cash is getting a little tight, end of year, sales aren't coming through right now. I'm gonna fire some people because I need to rein this in. You can actually take a look at everything there, and instead of saying, hey, wait, don't go fire these people, if you were to adjust this, do that, move this, then you could actually keep those people, which is going to save you X dollars down the road than having to rehire them, kind of a deal, right?
Exactly. So to that point, we're going to help evaluate that, but we're also going to be kind of that check engine light before the business owner would ever get to the point where they say, I need to let people go. We would have been having that conversation leading up to that, right? Because we're going to see those same warning signs, and we're going to be actively working on what that goal is.
So that's an interesting way to approach things. How do you get business owners who are typically control freaks and typically, unable to let go of things, to give you access to the thing that they're probably most protective of?
Yeah, to your point, I think, most business owners there's kind of a fear and anxiety maybe when it comes to their money. And it may be a lack of confidence that they don't know everything about the financial side of their business, and they know how significant it is. And that's really, really common, especially with a more visionary entrepreneur. We work with a lot of digital marketing firms that are creative types. And so they're the picture perfect for kind of what you're describing. And, and I think it really starts with, again, we're started by a business owner who owns multiple businesses. This is from the business owner's perspective, is how we do everything. It is not a CPA firm or just accounting nerds who are kind of ruling the day
Right.
in our setup. We're really much more focused around like supporting that business owner. And I think when a business owner really feels like somebody's got their back instead of just their handout to them, they really start to relax and feel like, okay, this is actually value added. And so that's been our mantra from the beginning. Even in our, quote unquote sales call, we're giving you value. Like
Yeah.
if I can't give you value, I don't want us to connect, period. And
Yeah.
so that's
And
the
I
way we
do
look
think
at it.
that's an interesting twist, because it's like, for me, I don't like sharing, talking, getting advice from people that are making less money than me. And I don't
Yeah,
mean that in a bad way,
sure.
but if you're not at my level as a financial planner, if you're not at my level or doing better than me, I'm going to have a real hard time trusting with you. But when you can say, hey, look, I'm a business owner, I know exactly the struggles you go through, and I can, help you, not from my knowledge standpoint, but also from being in your shoes. That's a really different conversation than, hey, if you do this, you can save X on your taxes, right?
Exactly.
So interesting. You called yourself a visionary and a founder. I find that very, very few business owners call themselves visionaries, know what that is. And so I'm curious, like, what or why do you consider yourself a visionary?
So, in part we run EOS. I'm a big
I saw
proponent of
that.
big
Mhm.
proponent of EOS, and EOS clarifies that terminology around visionary, right?
Right.
Many business owners kind of fit that criteria. But to your point, I think it comes down to really having a view and a strategy and maybe a different take on things than most people do.
Mhm.
And so when I created this business, I mean, I literally kind of created this business out of thin air with a vision for a better way to do things, right? I mean, I've tried every way possible to solve this problem of how to add value through accounting. And
Yeah.
even though I was passionate about accounting, I couldn't do it. I mean, we tried small firm, big firm, 1099 employee. I did it myself. I mean, every different way you could go about it, and kept coming back to the same result. And so I created a vision that, kind of a, if you build it, they will come a little bit concept
Yeah.
around. I
Don't
was
we
saying
all?
yeah, exactly. I was saying we're going to add value through this process even before I knew how on earth we would deliver that.
Right.
And I think the way we've come up with is actually really, really cool. So yeah, that's why.
Awesome. Okay, cool. Well, so as entrepreneurs and CEOs, we screw up a lot. There's no shame in admitting that. But before we get into your screw ups, let's talk about something that you did right, whether it was known or unknown along your entrepreneurial journey. It could be in any one of your companies, but like you might not have even known you did it right until on the other side of it, like, wow, that really worked. Give us
Yeah.
something positive before we deep dive into the negative.
Yeah. Well, and so like I'm a huge believer also. I agree with you. Huge believer we screw up almost everything before we get it right.
Mhm.
And a lot of times the greatest wins come on the heels of some of our biggest losses. And so
Yes.
for me, the positive one I'll give you is that out of necessity in my first business, which was a turnaround, I started obsessing over making money off every deal we touched. And so that
Mhm.
was like my mantra was, do not bring me, a deal that we can't make money on. It's just a non-starter to me. And so
Right.
whether it was a quote, and so back in those days, I'm a little old school, and I was in an old school business. We had literal manila folders with like a
Yep.
quote in it, and the manila folder with the order.
Right
And
here.
yeah, there we go. There we go. Yep. They're still alive and well. I got some in my drawer. And so it was like, bring me the manila folder and we're going to obsess over, how can we make this cheaper? How can we buy it cheaper? How can we sell it for more? I mean, it was just the basics of blocking and tackling, but it ingrained that in my company so deeply that our margins went from the low 30s to the low 60s
Mhm.
in a matter of about 5 years of just grind. But it wasn't, we're going to make one big change and up margins 30%. It was an absolute grind. And
Right.
so that obsession, I think when companies get into a growth mode or get into some good times, that falls by the wayside and we start getting what I kind of call fat and happy. We start
Yep.
getting that behavior that's like, oh, this is so good. I can be lazy and get away with it. And so that was a great thing that I learned early on, was really grind it out and obsess over, profitability at the smallest level leads to profitability at the biggest level.
Right. So then what are your goals for the next 2 to 5 years? Like where are you growing? What are your plans?
So the big thing for Finelevate is we're really well aligned with, again, I mentioned EOS. I'm obsessive about that. We've got a number of different EOS professional implementers that we're kind of talking to and figuring out how do we do this to add maximum value in that EOS context. So in EOS, they call it the finance seat. How are we supporting or sitting in the finance seat for our clients and helping them with that common language? Because I think what's so great about EOS, and I think where finance falls short a lot of times in most companies, EOS connects the whole team into a common language. It gets everyone pulling in the same direction. And a lot of times that business owner who doesn't know how to share the financial part of their business creates that same limitation that EOS addresses, which is no one else in their business knows if they're making money or not, knows if this order is profitable or not. And so by definition, you've got, the bulk of your team is not really on the same page. And so we fight hard to figure out how to do that for our clients. And so growing that connection with EOS is a big passion of mine. We're also big with Strategic Coach. I'm a member of 10X Strategic Coach, which is basically an entrepreneur's organization for training and development of the entrepreneur themselves. Help get the best out of them. And so that's also, why we focus so much on goals for our clients. Like, I don't want to just help you generically by saying, hey, make more money and grow. It's like, what's your goal? Is your goal to exit? Because if so, we got to put certain things in place to where you're ready for that.
Right. So you're bringing it up. So let's dive into it. The EOS, how long have you been running it?
So for across all of our companies, about 5 years, but each company is on a different journey. And I'll tell you, even as a business owner, I've got, companies where we're doing professional implementation. I've got customers where we've got outsiders doing a semi-professional implementation. EOS will probably slap my hand if they hear me say that, but an outsider who's basically implementing it for ourselves. But and then we've got companies that are doing it for ourselves. And I'll tell you, with Finelevate, I created the business plan. The original vision for it was a VTO, which is EOS's tool that basically maps out. Yep. And that was the very first thing I created. Was I created a VTO and got on the same page there with my business partner, and then said, hey, how do we go find the person who can run this company day to day? And this is what we're using to explain to them what we're trying to accomplish.
Right. Yeah. I'm a fan of EOS. My partner, Ken, he's an integrator with what he does at GCE Strategic Consulting. And the thing and why we created the Shift Spot and what we've kind of learned is EOS does provide some great foundational tools. But the one thing EOS doesn't seem to account for is the people side of things and the human behavior. And you need the right people and the right butts in the seats in order for EOS to work, or else you can spin your wheels on it. Just like any operating system, it doesn't matter, scaling up, EO, doesn't matter, so you just got to have the right butts and seats. So tell us, how many employees do you have?
Around 100 across all companies, maybe a little less than that.
Okay. And so as you've scaled your business, what have been the challenges that have taken you by surprise with that many staffers?
Oh my goodness. So to your point, and I agree with you 100%. What I love about EOS, I'll just say real quick, is that EOS is a framework. It's nothing more than a framework. And to your point, versus like a scaling up, I thought scaling up is brilliant. I think the content in it, the strategies, the tactics are amazing. The problem is that it's overwhelming to many members of your team. And so EOS is kind of a strip down. It is just the framework around like, here's how we operate, that's common language. But to your point, it doesn't really solve those problems. It just kind of gives you a framework through which you can help solve them if you have the know-how for your team and all the things you're describing. The team would be a really obvious one to me. So the way you run a 6 to 8 person company versus a 15 person company versus a 25 person company versus a 50 person company is dramatically different. And I think that for most entrepreneurs, especially if you're in your first gig running a company, you hit those ceilings and you don't realize that the problem is you, right? You start doing the whole like, no, it's that guy and it's that lady and what are they doing?
Hire, they did the wrong thing. If they just would have been on board with the vision, then this wouldn't have happened. And, you're sitting there pointing, and like when you're pointing at somebody, there's always a finger coming right back at you, but you just never see it.
Exactly. And that's what it really takes, right? Is you almost, I kind of always describe it as like, you have to go through a true like evolutionary process as a CEO, as an owner. If you're running your company,
down for sure.
yeah, you have to really dig deep and ask yourself, because to me, the kind of like, hey, we're all in this team together, platoon leader kind of like, let's charge up the hill thing that works at 6 or 8 people starts falling on deaf ears at 15 when you've got a number of people you're not working with every day. Right. They don't see you for that side of you. And so when you go out and do that, they think, oh, this is just somebody trying to get me to work harder, Yeah. And so the way you lead and the way you approach your team, and I would argue for businesses, the same thing on the finance side. So the way you're able to, when you're a $500,000 a year company, you could probably run your business, you think, out of your checking account, and you're fine. Right. And maybe you are, but if you start to hit a growth phase, okay, how do you justify hiring the next people? Or if you hit a downturn like you were talking about earlier, right, how do you address that, right? How do you look at that? It starts to get way heavier than, hey, we're doing well, we got money in the bank.
Right. So then, as a leader and a visionary, what keeps you up at night?
Oh, goodness. Believe it or not, I think COVID did amazing things. So my first company is in the airport space. That was a total decimation type of event for companies like ours. We luckily survived it. We're a 28-year-old company, a 27-year-old company. But that gave me a new appreciation. And I went back to the well for a book that I'm obsessed with, which is called The Obstacle's the Way by Ryan Holiday. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it. It's basically stoicism and mindset around almost realizing, like I said, the greatest wins come on the heels of our biggest losses. It's like I say, from the rubble of our failures, we build our success. And so that changed my mind going through that deep of a challenge, and made me just really love and appreciate the process. And so what keeps me up at night, believe it or not, is the opportunities, like excited about the next thing. I don't sweat the struggles as much as I used to. It's not to say that they don't weigh on me, they do on everyone, but I kind of put them in their place, and I realize that, like, I don't maybe understand it yet, but that's going to be the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. And when I realized that about COVID, and it was like everything I'm doing now in FinElevate, a lot of my business model theory that I'm kind of always working on, all of that came from those struggles. And without those, I'd be just kind of coasting along thinking that, the businesses we were in and the way we were looking at things made sense and was right. And so that for me, I mean, believe it or not, I have a hard time going to sleep because I'm getting so excited about marketing and about the different ways to, take our message and get it out there to the world.
Right. You've mentioned several times in this discussion, coach, mentor, mastermind. What specific quality? I mean, obviously, we're huge proponents of that at the Shift Spot. That's, we help coach up your leadership team so that you can help them get to that next level. So the CEO can be doing what they want, and they can be having the time and freedom that they wanted to, without having to, sometimes feel like an imposter trying to elevate their team when sometimes they don't even know how to do it, because they might have had this great idea, and then all of a sudden you're growing people. But it's a hard day to look at yourself and say, hey, look, I don't know how to lead, or I don't know how to manage. But the reality is like the second you're able to do that, that's kind of, where everything turns around. That's where we step in, honestly. But when you say, masterminds, this and that, what qualities do you look for in a coach or in an advisor?
Well, I think, I've done that before, right? I've had business coaches, I've done mastermind groups that both have founded or attended. To your point, I would say in a coach, I want somebody who's going to be candid with me above all. In other words, they need to tell me if I'm not doing well at something. And so I actually had a business coach I worked with for a long time, somebody I really admire, love the guy, he was great. But I remember we got to kind of a stage after several years, and I said, hey, what could I be doing? And he said, well, let me think on that. And he came back and he kind of didn't have an answer. And I said, I think we're done.
We've outgrown each other, which you do outgrow your coach,
absolutely,
your all the time. So.
Absolutely, as well as peers, right? I mean, we're going different paths, and we, and that's one of the struggles. But I think whether it's a mastermind group peer or someone who I'm bringing into our mastermind group, we're kind of in that phase right now of bringing in some new people to a mastermind group that I founded and basically help run. And it's like, if you can't be candid, if you cannot come in here and tell us the good, the bad, and the ugly, I don't have time for that. I mean, as an entrepreneur, we're all busy. Like if we're
Yeah.
not kind of cutting to the chase and getting to the raw heart of it,
Yeah.
then we're just really wasting each other's times. And hey, we have to get to know each other and get comfortable and get, we have to grow to like each other, and all of those things are great. But that's really the realness of it, is part of what we're trying to do in FinElevate as well, is like, I can't just blow smoke for you.
Yeah.
And I also can't just beat up on you and then hand you a list of to-dos. There's got to be some middle ground where we have to be real and say, but don't worry, like we're going to jump on this.
Yeah, gotcha. So if you had to do it all over again, speaking to a younger self, a less experienced self, what would your advice be to you?
Oh my goodness. I think the part I talked about in that I learned from COVID, it would be, don't obsess over the losses as much as you do learn from them. And I call that the turn. I talk about like when you have that moment of panic, which we all do when something bad has happened. And then eventually we all come, and I ask this question, like, can you tell me the greatest things that have ever happened to you? And can you tie them back to something bad that you thought would never end, right? And we all can say that that's happened. And so once we can acknowledge that intellectually, it's like, when in that emotional state can that turn happen? And you go, wait a minute, I don't understand it yet, but something great will come from this. I have to just have the belief that it will. And so I call that moment the turn. And so I've gotten to where I would tell my younger self, get to the turn faster. Yeah. Because when you're inexperienced, or you're just in that highly emotional state, or the loss is that big, sometimes it's months or even years people struggle in that. And and I think that when you're in that mode,
or like, do you ever watch Suits by chance?
Oh yeah, I'm watching it now, like everybody else.
So yeah, the thing that I don't get about that show is that, like, they come in and they like throw the thing on down. They're like, you owe me. You owe me. And then it'll flash back to something that happened. And it's like, somebody got a case that, this person thinks they should have gotten. I don't have the career that I have because you got that case 30 years ago. And like, I literally said to my husband, like last night, I'm like, I just don't see how people sit in that sort of like loss for 40 years or whatever. So it is one of those things where I call it fail fast, right? Or failing forward. I've always said, I don't believe that you fail at anything that you give 100% to, or that you learn something from. But right now, my biggest thing in what we're doing is, fail fast. If it doesn't work, let it happen fast so that you can make quick shifts, whatever. It's that, stewing in it, staying in it, analyzing it, it's just taking action. And like, I promise, if you do anything for long enough, something's going to come out the other side.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I believe that. I've always said we either win or we learn, right?
Right.
And the further into my career I get, the more I realize the learning's actually more valuable than the winning. That's the crazy part. Once you recognize that and you go, wait a minute, and the bigger the failure, the bigger the lesson, right? So it's like, okay, as long as I survive it, this is going to be the best thing that's ever happened. And so far, luckily, we always survived any challenges we've faced. But, I think to your point, it's the give up kind of mentality that ultimately kills you.
Yep. All right. So in wrapping up, where are you going to be investing your resources in the next year?
Investing my resources, well, beyond learning, like I said, which is really my obsession. I mean, that's why I'm so involved with some of these different groups and things that I do. That's where I invest a lot of my time, connecting with other entrepreneurs, collaborating on interesting things, because I can learn so much from somebody else's unique take on the world. And then really just investing a ton of time into growing FinElevate. I mean, that's my passion. For my other companies are more or less operating day to day without me. They have CEOs. And so this is really the one where I feel like it can make a difference. And don't get me wrong, we're all in business to make money. There's no question. That's part of it. I wouldn't be a good steward of my company advising other companies about their finances if we couldn't make money. Right. But I'm really excited about what we're doing and what it can help other companies with, because they want to fulfill their dreams, right? And right now I know a lot of them are being held back by their finances. So I'm super passionate about that.
And the thing is too, that when you are doing something that you love, like as a successful business owner, yes, you start out to make money, but then it comes up, is that all there is, kind of thing. Yeah. It's you get the car. is that all there is? Like for a week or two or a month or a year, it's like, oh my, you get in the car and you smell the car, and you just the stick shift, and then like, so
Yep.
I really do think you have to have that. It doesn't have to be your passion project, and not everybody makes money on their passion projects. And I don't suggest everybody do their passion projects, but there's got to be a deeper why for, you to push, because the money, it becomes less fulfilling for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So Colin Sanburg, he can be found at finelevate.com. Do you want to leave our listeners with any sort of advice as we wrap up here?
I would just say, know your numbers, right? I mean, we talked about it, make money on every deal and get the data necessary to be able to do that, right? You can little wins build up to big wins. And so that's the mantra that I always have for any of our clients.
Awesome. Well, we loved having you here today, and thanks so much for your time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Thanks.